All right, Nico, can you say, welcome to another episode of Healthy Births, Happy Babies?
It's a happy episode. Happy babies.
Welcome back to another episode of Healthy Births, Happy Babies. I'm Dr. Jay Warren. I'm the prenatal and pediatric chiropractor here at the Cap Wellness Center. And this podcast is all about helping you have a proactively healthy pregnancy so you can have a safe, gentle, natural birth. And that's going to allow you to bring your baby into the world that much more gently and healthily so you can start off your family experience more powerfully than if it's full of stress and trauma and other health concerns. So if you are a fan of this show and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so. Wherever you listen to your podcast, go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss an upcoming episode. And also, if you haven't rated or reviewed the podcast and you've enjoyed it and gotten value of it, that will really help me out because that'll allow this podcast to reach more and more parents like yourself that might be missing out on this type of information and helping them along their parenting journey. So thank you in advance for that. And thank you if you already have rated and reviewed. And I just got to share this review. It just came in a couple of days ago. I love it. It's from iBalloons, which is a great username, right? She calls it my go-to podcast while nursing. I started listening to this podcast while I was in my third trimester. While I enjoyed it then, I appreciate the information even more now with my newborn. I love listening to the podcast in the middle of the night while feeding, burping, keeping my baby upright before settling baby back down to sleep. The content and duration of the episodes are perfect. Well, that is a great time to listen to a podcast. I hadn't heard of a listener doing that before, so I appreciate you sending that in, iBalloons, and of course, I appreciate your 5-star review. So let me switch over now to the episode. I'm really excited to have Paige Bellenbaum on the podcast today. She and I were put together by a previous guest that was on the podcast from expectful.com, the meditation app that has come out for pregnant women, and doing some work with them and looking at the owner-operators. They put me in touch with Paige, and I'm really excited to have her share what she's up to because I think it's really important. She's the program director of the Motherhood Center in New York City, and it's a really innovative program. It's a comprehensive center for pregnant women and also postpartum women that are dealing with perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. It's unfortunately, truly unique. There's only a couple programs out there doing this type of work, and it's just launched this year, and it's going fantastically. So what I hope, and obviously Paige does as well, is that with the success of this program, there's more and more of these centers. She's going to explain exactly what's involved in her center. And so if you're in New York City, you're going to be able to learn about it, but really in general, looking at postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, what we call perinatal mood and anxiety disorders, how impactful it can be, what to look for, and even more importantly, what you can do about it. So before I switch over to our conversation, though, let me, as always, take a moment to hear a word from our sponsor, the Cap Wellness Center.
Hi, I'm Maureen Higa, and I'm the acupuncturist at Cap Wellness Center. One of the things I love about working at Cap Wellness Center is getting to be around all the brave, strong, and inspiring women. I'm always inspired by my patients' ability to rise to their challenges, overcome obstacles, and also get creative in their pursuit towards their health goals. I feel honored to be part of their journey, whether it's helping them to start a family, have a healthy pregnancy, or helping them through their postpartum recovery.
All right, let me introduce Paige to you now. Paige Bellenbaum is the program director of the Motherhood Center of Manhattan. For the past 20 years, Paige has been committed to the field of social work practice, focusing her efforts on direct service to have micro impact and public policy to have a macro impact. Paige started her social working career at a homeless shelter for families in San Francisco. Then she moved to New York City in 2000 to get her master's of social work at Columbia University. After she graduated, she worked for the Center of Family Life as a community developer and then as the director of advocacy and community outreach for Habitat for Humanity in New York City for many, many years. And while at Habitat, she had her first child, Max. After Max was born, Paige suffered from severe postpartum depression that almost cost her her own life. Once she began to heal, she became committed to fighting for education, screening, and treatment for postpartum depression so that no more woman would have to suffer silently. She drafted legislation in New York State that was championed by State Senator Liz Krueger, mandating education and strongly encouraging screening of all new and expecting mothers that was signed into law in 2014. Paige has been an outspoken advocate on the issue of postpartum depression and uses her own story as a tool for change. She's appeared on The Today Show, NPR, PBS NewsHour, and in Women's Health Magazine, The Wall Street Journal, and several other print publications. Paige is currently on the steering committee of the New York City Maternal Depression Collaborative that is responsible for screening every new and expecting mother for postpartum depression. And as I mentioned already, she's the program director of the Motherhood Center of Manhattan, which is what we're going to be talking about today. So with no further ado, let me switch over to my conversation with Paige. All right, Paige, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I'm really excited to have you here because you have a great message that I really want to share with our listeners because I think it's really necessary. You've been in social work for your entire career, first in San Francisco, and now you're here you're there in New York City, and you've really doing amazing things at the Motherhood Center, and I really want to highlight that. It was a mutual acquaintance friend, Mark, that put us together. He was over at Expectful, that is doing great things in prenatal meditation and helping with stress relief there, and he put us together, and I'm glad that we're going to be able to feature what you're doing. And we've already heard your bio there, but give us a little background about your process, and obviously it was your experience having your own baby that brought you to where you are today. So share with our listeners that story.
Yes, happy to do so. So I, 11 years ago, gave birth to my first child, Max. And I think one of the things that society expects us to feel or somehow messages to us that we should feel is that immediately after you have your baby and your baby's put on your chest, you feel this unconditional burst of love and affection, and you can't imagine ever having had a life without this beautiful creature. And I did not have that experience. I had a very long and hard labor, and by the time it was over, and I did have that moment to hold him on my chest, I just kind of wanted to have somebody else hold him and have a minute to myself and just breathe, considering how traumatic the birth had been. When I look back on retrospect of my own experience in the months to come, I realized that that's kind of where it started. I suffered from severe postpartum depression with my son and anxiety. When I first came home from the hospital, I had a lot of anxiety. That was the first set of symptoms. Feeling very concerned about, was he eating enough? Was he sleeping enough? Was he breathing at night? Was my nursing going okay? Had my milk come in? I became fixated and obsessive and compulsive about all of these racing thoughts that were going through my mind. And after enough anxiety built up over a period of time and lack of sleep, which was happening to me even when Max was sleeping, I still couldn't sleep. I started to find myself dipping into a deeper and deeper depression. And that went on for a few months of me feeling an enormous amount of guilt and shame, feeling isolated, feeling disconnected from my son, feeling as though I wish I'd never had him, that I had made one of the biggest mistakes a person could ever make. And I wanted to buy a one-way ticket to another place and leave my son with my husband because I felt surely they would be better off together because I was a terrible mother. And I really, really didn't want to be with them anymore. And it got so bad that I did start having some thoughts about ending my own life. And it all culminated one day when I was pushing him in the stroller and a bus was passing by, and I had this overwhelming urge to just end it for both of us. And I knew at that moment I really needed help.
How long into your postpartum was that?
It was probably about 5 or 6 months in, and the anxiety started immediately, and the depression probably started within the first month. So it was a long time to live with that level of discomfort.
Yeah. Okay, so and at that point when things culminated, you as a social worker probably were you able to identify what was going on with this postpartum depression, or were you so immersed in it that it was other people that helped you bring it out? I mean, were you able to observe yourself?
I was absolutely not,
Yeah.
and it's one of the things that I like to give a plug to when I am sharing my story publicly is even as a trained social worker who has been, taught how to recognize mental health symptomatology and others. When you're in it yourself, you are completely blind to and incapable of noticing or being able to label what's happening to you. And it was so all-encompassing that I could hardly get off the sofa, let alone conduct research online to figure out where I could go to get treatment. I didn't know how bad it was. I didn't know if it was normal or not. I felt as though I was rendered incapable of getting through the tasks that a normal person gets through during the day. So I had no idea. And, we've had, when I get to, the program that we're going to be talking about later, we've had trained clinicians, psychiatrists, psychologists come through the program with severe postpartum depression and anxiety that haven't been able to determine or figure out what's going on with them, or more importantly, figure out what to do with it.
Right. And that's exactly what your program is all about. It's like helping moms finally get help. But what was the turning point for you? Like you had that incident with the bus and you recognized, okay, this is major. Where did you go from there?
So I put myself into a cab, and I had done limited research when I was at my worst, and that was really at my worst. And I had contacted one psychiatrist who was supposedly the best in the field, and I spoke to her on the phone in hysterics, and she said she'd be happy to give me an evaluation 3 months from then for something like $1,700. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
A, I don't have that money, and B, I can't wait that long. So there was one other program that I'd heard about, the Payne Whitney Women's Center at Cornell University, and I put myself in a cab without an appointment, drove up there, got out, walked in, and said, I need help, and was seen very quickly by a team of psychiatrists. And just interesting note, one of the women that was on my treatment team is a woman that I ended up going in business with to open up the Motherhood Center. And we only came to figure this out a few months ago when somebody was doing a press piece and said, if you could prove that Dr. Berndorf treated you, then that would make the story even better. And so she was on my treatment team. And, with therapy and with medication, I started to feel gradually better. And within 9 months, I was able to go back to work and really start to feel like myself again. And most importantly, start to connect with and love my son and bond with him and feel that kind of unconditional love that I hadn't felt on day one and I hadn't felt until I went for help.
No. And did anyone around you during that time sense or talk to you about how you were feeling or how you were acting, or were you pretty well contained within it?
So one thing to note about new and expecting moms that are suffering from postpartum depression and anxiety is how incredibly masterful they can be at hiding it. Mm-hmm. There's an enormous amount of guilt and shame that goes along with having these feelings because there's this expectation that you're going to love motherhood. And there's also a fear and the stigma of mental health, and in certain circumstances, the fear of having your baby taken away if you're going to be open about how you're really feeling. And scary thoughts and harm coming to your baby is one of the number one symptoms of postpartum anxiety and depression. It's very, very common. So there's a fear that, confiding in somebody about all the thoughts and feelings you're having is a scary thing to do. I thought it was pretty obvious just based on the fact that I stopped leaving the house. I wasn't really talking to friends anymore. My husband at the time was very worried, but he didn't know what normal looked like either. And
right.
his brother's wife was also incredibly anxious during, the first few months after she had the baby. So he didn't know what normal looked like, and I didn't really tell anybody how bad it was.
Right. Because I think even in the more milder senses, like all moms are going to have anxiety about like, is the baby breathing and am I doing the right thing because it's so new? Or, the kind of hole that women can get in the first couple months with a newborn because it's so overwhelming and they're doing that you might not reach out as much. But obviously, there's a line that's crossed that is something where it needs more help than just that initial thing. What kind of things can you recommend to look out for, and when it becomes something that's clinically something that needs to be helped with?
So I think when it comes to anxiety in particular, anxiety that's gotten out of hand and would respond well to treatment and would make mom feel better, sleep is really kind of a primary indicator. Okay. If mom is not able to sleep, even when the baby's sleeping, and as we all know with an infant, you're lucky to get a 3-hour stretch. Right. If mom can't sleep then, or if she can only sleep for a little bit of them, but then wakes up feeling anxious, awaiting the baby to wake up, checking the baby's breathing, making sure everything's okay, if she's having racing thoughts, then that's a clear indication of something being a little bit more severe than what we would consider common. Eating is also a really big indicator for moms that have really no appetite, that have kind of stopped eating or overeating. That can be another thing that we look for. Over agitation and rage, feelings of just being so angry and irritable and having a really difficult time being able to control your range of emotions. And then, just the basic indication of crying and being weepy. If you're crying multiple times a day, and it's, it's something that's hard to control, it's coming up out of nowhere. But if you're spending a lot of the day crying, then that's also a really good indication that this is something that you're having a hard time with. And those are kind of the basic depression, anxiety symptoms. There's also postpartum psychosis and postpartum OCD and PTSD, and those have a different set of symptoms. But I think the two kind of keywords are, if you're feeling hopeless and helpless and worthless, and you're having a hard time making it through the completion of daily activities, that's a discomfort that you don't have to continue and shouldn't have to continue, and treatment will help.
Okay. And if a woman's say having challenges with, say, just even daily activities and the like that you just described, and help is offered in the, say, of help with daily activities, but then that help's not received, or there's still anxiety, is that kind of one of those signs of, okay, it's not just needing more sleep, more help, there is some kind of underlying depression, anxiety that needs to be worked with?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it's unfortunate. I hear so many stories of women that come to the Motherhood Center that say, they just had their second child and they're experiencing depression or anxiety again. And they explain after their first birth, they had it also, and they didn't treat it. And so they had it in between the delivery of their first child and their second, and it became their baseline, and it became kind of a normal way of functioning and living. And that's so sad to hear that people kind of accept this as the new normal when it doesn't have to be that way. And there are a few and far between situations where a mom will have it and won't treat it, and it will dissipate over time. But nobody should have to continue on that way when treatment is available, and a mom can feel better. It's again, mom's grappling with that enormous feeling of guilt and shame about not being the perfect mother, not feeling more connected with the baby, not enjoying it more. All should is such a dangerous word. I just finished leading a support group today where should kept coming up, and it's, what does should mean according to who? Who's should, right? But there is just this expectation, again, societally, that women enjoy parenting and that it's easy and wonderful and they can keep all these balls in the air, and it's not easy. And it's okay to say that, and it's okay to get help when it's not easy.
Right. And I think even just acknowledging, one, that it's not easy, and then hearing a lot of other moms say the same thing, you don't feel alone. And then you're more likely to be able to share more and get the support that's necessary.
Yeah, a lot of the healing process that goes on here at the Motherhood Center, and I had just shared a story with the moms earlier. There was one day that I was sitting on the park bench with my son, and I just was feeling so low and so dark, and there was this other new mom sitting next to me, and she was this beautiful little girl, and the girl was cooing, and she was smiling and bouncing her baby around, and I just felt like, oh, I mean, here's yet another indication of how much I suck as a mother.
Mm-hmm.
And she looked at me and said, "Isn't this the most amazing thing that's ever happened to you?" And I looked at her and I said, "No, this is the hardest thing I've ever done.
Yeah.
Some days I wish I never did it. Like, I don't even know what I'm doing." And I, to this day, feel slightly guilty. So that pretty smile she had on her face started to turn down, and then the tears started to drop down her face, and she said, "Thank you so much for saying that. I feel the same way." And there's so much to be said about us as women giving each other permission to have these feelings. And there's something so cathartic about the group experience when you're around other women that are going through it, and you can look at a room full of women and say, wow, you guys are all going through this too? Like, I thought I was the only one. I felt so alone. And that has so much to do with promoting the healing process.
Right. And, so describe to us at the Motherhood Center, like what, obviously you have like group processes, but tell us the dynamics of women that are coming to you and what services that you're able to offer, and obviously the responses you're getting.
So we provide treatment options to pregnant and new mothers that are suffering from mild to severe symptoms of perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. On the milder end, we offer classes and support groups for new moms. As I referenced earlier today, I was leading our postpartum depression support group, which is open to the general public. People can drop in, people can come week after week. It's really up to them. And then we also offer a whole bunch of other new and expecting mom related services like childbirth education and infant CPR and breastfeeding support and all of that. That's really on the mild and more educational end. In the middle, we offer outpatient therapy and medication management. So for pregnant and new moms that are suffering from mild to moderate symptoms, they can see a therapist that specializes in perinatal mood and anxiety disorders, and also a reproductive psychiatrist. And a reproductive psychiatrist specializes in women's psychiatry from menses to menopause is how they like to say it. But they have a particular focus on the pregnant and postpartum period, and they're very well versed and familiar with what medications are safe to use during pregnancy and while nursing. And so they have access to both of those services. But really the core of our model is the day program, and that is for our moms that are more moderate to severe in symptomatology, and they are really, really struggling making it through the day. And they are having some fairly severe anxiety and depression during pregnancy or postpartum. A few women are referred to us from inpatient facilities, so they've had a manic episode or psychotic episode of some sort. They were hospitalized, and then they come to us. But the majority of our referrals come from OBGYNs, pediatricians, doulas, midwives, anybody who touches a pregnant or new mom around that period, we get referrals from. And moms come to us for anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks in the day program. One of the greatest perks about the Motherhood Center is we have an on-site nursery that's fully staffed with a director, assistant, and we have a whole assortment of trained volunteers who come in and are able to look after our babies, all of whom can be as young as 4 days to typically around a year, but sometimes we make exceptions if it's close enough to the first year. And moms are welcome to bring babies in and out during the day. The day is comprised of different therapeutic support groups that integrate therapeutic modalities that are best practices with the perinatal community. And we also have a holistic approach. So we offer yoga, art therapy, meditation, and mindfulness. We have a lactation consultant who comes that can provide lactation support to moms that are nursing and having some challenges with that. We have an Ask the Pediatrician session, Ask the Midwife. So we like to make sure that we're covering the full gamut of needs and questions and support that new and expecting moms have that are really struggling. And then when they graduate from the day program, we recently realized that many of them weren't well enough to go back out and back home and only participate in therapy like once a week. So we started an intensive outpatient program. So those moms, once they're done with the day program, they keep coming back, but only for 3 days a week for half the day. And then after about a week or two of that, they've made significant progress, and they're able to either step down to outpatient therapy, or we release them back to their provider if they were seeing someone before. And just to give a sense of efficacy, in this line of work, we use an instrument called the EPDS, and it's a 10-question instrument that measures a pregnant or new mother's level of depression or anxiety. And it's the top score is 30, the lowest is 0. Clinically, anything over a 10 is something that should be considered as mild to moderate postpartum depression and or anxiety. And our moms on average come in scoring about a 24 on the EPDS upon intake, and upon discharge, the average score is a 7.
Wow.
So in that time frame that they're with us, we're able to assist them in making that much progress in how they're feeling.
That's amazing. Those are fantastic results. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
How long typically are women there at the center?
Usually anywhere from, say, 2 to 4 weeks, usually 2 weeks in the day program, 2 weeks in the intensive outpatient. And in an effort to keep the doors open, moms have a hard time leaving. For a lot of moms, and we get situations all completely across the spectrum because we're very committed to making sure that this service is open to every woman across the socioeconomic divide. So we have some women that come in that are doing fine financially. We have women come in that are on Medicaid, and really struggling financially. And it's been a beautiful experience to watch the common denominator of motherhood connect everybody regardless of who they are, where they've come from, or anything that might typically make them different. They're all able to find those similarities in one another. And what's really nice about having the day program and the intensive outpatient program running at the same time, so that moms, even when they step down, they're still with new moms coming in, is those moms that are about to leave can say to the new moms coming in who are convinced that they're never going to feel better, nothing's going to help. Those moms that are ready to leave say, but wait, I was you 3 weeks ago. I was right where you are, and I felt the same way, and I feel so much better now. And so they're finally given a sense of hope that they're looking at someone in front of them who's made this progress, and it allows them to be hopeful that maybe the same thing can and will happen to them. But once moms do leave, we also have 4 weeks of aftercare. So we offer 4 weeks of a support group where they can come in and still see the women that they went through the program with. The relationships that transpire here is something that we hadn't really given a lot of thought to. These women get so close, spending every day together in such a high level of intimacy. We have 2 women that were in the same cohort that are starting a business together. We have another woman who started a closed Facebook page for her cohort, and they all communicate frequently. And even just with this support group I ran today with 3 moms that had never met each other before, at the end we're saying, oh my God, I'm so glad to actually be around real people who are talking about real things, and they all exchange each other's email addresses. So the peer support aspect of this, I would say, is 50% of the healing process.
Yeah, because they're not feeling alone. And they got kiddos the same age, relatively, so they have that in common as well. So in a funding sense, if you don't mind me asking, is this like an out-of-pocket expense for the women coming in? Are you funded by grants? Is it donations?
So we are currently operating as a mission-driven for-profit. So all of the funding that we were able to receive to get this up and running was friends and family and a handful of investors. What I'm doing right now with one of the co-founders is trying to establish a 501c3 so that we would be a hybrid. And that entity would allow us to tap into grants and foundations to be able to subsidize the cost of full scholarship, of which we do. We do provide full scholarships to low-income moms for any tier of service that we offer. And so the way it works is we do work with out-of-network insurance. And after a mom calls in and lets us know what's going on with her, we do a brief screen. We get her health insurance. We check her out-of-network benefits. And it can go many different ways. If somebody has good out-of-network benefits and they have a low deductible or they've exceeded it, then that's a win-win. And, the health insurance company will pick up, 70 to 80% of the cost, and they're responsible for 20. And we can and have a sliding scale if even that 20 or 30 is hard on a mom. If they don't have out-of-network or if they have a high deductible, we do slide for any of our services, whether it's the day program or outpatient services. And then we also have full scholarships for women that have severe financial hardship. And then we just recently started applying for single case agreements with health insurance companies for those who have no out-of-network or poor out-of-network. And that's great, and we've been lucky every time we've gotten an agreement with the health insurance provider, and they do cover a large chunk of the treatment that's being provided. So we're creative, and we figure out ways. The whole intent of this program was to not have to turn anyone away, because there's nowhere else like this in New York City or New York State, and really there's just a handful across the nation. So, as much as we can until we hit capacity, and then the hope is that we'll open one in every borough, and then we'll start to open ones across the U.S. We want to make sure that everyone gets care.
Yes. Well, I think it's what you're doing is an incredible service. And I see that as you grow and develop the program, you're at capacity, it's just going to be driven out of demand. And hopefully, like with funding sources and donation sources, as well as, reimbursement for the insurance, that can happen, because I think that should be available to any woman that needs that kind of comprehensive support, not just, the first level of, group therapy or the like, but everything else that you offer is really fantastic. And that's why I'm so happy to have you here share about that. And hopefully that helps spread the word, one, for New York, but then also elsewhere in the country as well.
Yeah. And we're not everywhere, obviously. Hopefully one day we will be. But, one of our co-founders is on the board of Postpartum Support International, and this is the number one international organization that's been around for many, many years that serves as a central referral source. So there are coordinators in every state and every city across the U.S. All of their phone numbers are available on the Postpartum Support International website. And someone can go look at the PSI website, find their city or state, and identify a statewide coordinator who will then put them in touch with different specialists in their community that specialize in perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. So PSI is our BFF, and we work very closely with them. And until we can work alongside them to actually have facilities to send people to, it is a great resource for folks all across the U.S. to use.
Great. And I'll make sure I have links to that website for listeners to go to. And also tell them about your website. Where can they find out more about your center?
Yes, please visit us at www.themotherhoodcenter, all one word, .com. And you can read a little bit more about all of our services and offerings. And you can also see the facility, which I think is important. We intentionally created a space that's not affiliated with a hospital, because we didn't want there to be any rivalry or, some hospital not referring to us because we were affiliated with another hospital. And also so that we could have control over the environment, we've created a really warm, welcoming space that does not feel medical at all. And we keep hearing over and over again, women really appreciate that feeling of being in a living room as opposed to a medical waiting room.
Right. I was going to say that looking at the pictures on your site, it has a very homey feel to it that I would imagine would be much better than a sterile environment where you're feeling like
Absolutely.
a patient rather than feeling like a mother.
A person. Yep, exactly.
Right. Well, so in our last moment here, what's the major take-home message you'd like our listeners to take? Either a mom that is going into being a mom and little words of advice for her if she's still pregnant, or if a woman right now is having troubles, what would you like to share with them?
I want women to know, pregnant or postpartum, that perinatal mood and anxiety disorders are incredibly common, that so far the data suggests 1 in 5 women suffer, and those are just women that come forward. When we recognize the unfortunate stigma around mental health, it really does hold a lot of women back from coming forward and asking for help. So I want to encourage everybody, whether it's you or a friend of yours or someone that you know who you think might be having a hard time, to let them know that it's incredibly common, which it is, and that treatment works. And there has never been anyone who's been suffering from a perinatal mood and anxiety disorder that comes in for treatment that doesn't get better. Everybody gets better with the right treatment and the right help. So I just want to let moms know that it's very common, and it's okay to ask for help, and it's okay to not feel like you're enjoying this and you're great at it, because 1 in 5, if not more, mothers feel the same way.
Right. You're not alone. Well, Paige, thank you
You're
so
not alone.
much. Thank you so much for, one, being here and sharing this message. And I know this will be really helpful for our listeners, but then also thank you for the work you're doing. I think it's so important. And if there's anything that you can think of that we can do here to help support that, let me know, because I really believe in what you're doing and want this message to spread.
Well, thank you so much for giving me the time to speak about this. I really appreciate it.
Hi, it's Dr. J again, and I want to thank you so much for listening to the podcast. It's something I really enjoy doing, and I, as a parent, learn a ton from these experts coming on and sharing their wisdom, so I hope you're getting a lot out of it too. And I want to share something else with you. I've created a guide called the 40 Ways to Connect with Your Baby During Pregnancy. It's full of simple things you can do on a day-to-day basis that will help strengthen that bond that you have with your baby. It's a free download. You can go to my website at drjwarren.com/40ways and just enter your email. I'll send it right to you. You can download it and start working on it right away. All of the research that I'm learning in the fields of epigenetics and attachment parenting is showing that the more bonded you are during your pregnancy with your baby, the better the birth is going to go and the better parenting is going to go, because you have that strong foundation, a strong connection to build upon. So go again to my website. It's drjwarren.com/40ways and get that free guide. And again, thanks for listening.